If I were to tell you that she was proud, then I would be misleading you. She was extremely proud. She was independent. She was an old woman who lived in what was left of a house in the damp, dark hovel of the cellar. She had lived here for a long time. Once it had been filled with the laughter of children, but now she was here and on her own. She had the choice. She could have lived with some relatives in the other valley, but it was this valley that she liked the best. Everyone in the community knew her and made sure that she was all right and would look after her. For if nothing else in Ebbw Vale, they looked after their own. Her husband, when he had worked in the mine, had kept the house well. There was always a coal fire burning to draw the air right from the cellar right up to the top of the house. But now that he had died, there was no more free coal. But she was proud. I've already told you she was proud. And she tried to keep the house, at least her part of the house, as best as she could. But it was dark, and it was damp, and now it was hard work, for her children had gone. Lots of people had been extremely excited, no, very excited, when they had started to mine for iron, when they had started to pull coal from out of the ground. But her children, they did not like the way that this once green valley, that had once been filled with trees, was now being scarred and filled with smoke from the foundry, smoke from where they smelted the iron ore. And one by one they had gone and they had left her alone. But she still tried to keep this house as best as she could. Some of her children had moved further than the next valley. Some had moved as far as London, Birmingham. They'd gone to find work in England. Every now and again she would get a letter from a son who had gone to work in America. There'd been many of the priests, many of the vicars had said that there was a better life to be had in America, and they would set up a small area in the new Americas where it would be like a Welsh community filled with Welsh people. But she knew she would never go and see them. Now, her daughter, who lived in the next valley, would come as often as she could, but it was a long journey. I mean, this was 1790 after all, and when, on a day like this, when it was the first cold biting wind of autumn, there was no way that she would travel those whole 8 miles to come and see her mother. Now, on this cold evening, when what few trees were left were filled with colourful leaves, this old woman sat down and started to read. She hadn't been able to read much, but she could read from the Bible. She loved this leather-bound Bible because on the front pages were written down all of the history of her family, who had lived within this valley, who had married who, whose children were who, and it was like a family history. And she loved it. She loved to look at her scrawled handwriting, where with each child she would remember how she'd written down so proudly how when each had been born, the date, the time, the weather. She was pleased that none of her children had been born on a cold autumn evening like this. She didn't have much. Inside of the house there was the Bible, there was herself, there was a small fire, a table, a chair and a bed. But her land, the land that this house was on, some had said that there was iron ore underneath this house, underneath her cellar. Some had said that there was limestone. Some had said that there could be coal. And the company wanted iron and limestone and coal. And they saw her like a saw that would always be picked, because they wanted to get to what was underneath her home. But she wasn't going to move from this place. No. She could have moved to the valley 8 miles away. She never would have travelled to the Americas. But then, just as she was turning the first page of the Bible, after she'd looked at the family history, there was a great and a heavy knock upon the door. She knew full well who it was. It was the bailiffs from the company. She'd kept up a rent. She'd kept the house as well as she could.